Senior editor at The Post, millennial, and author of Unmasked: Inside Antifa's Radical Plan to Destroy Democracy. Andy Ngo. Andy, you've been at the forefront for fighting for free speech. The danger, I think, is most apparent when you have who is defining what is false, what is misinformation, and what is dangerous, no?
Yes, I think what's most sinister about the revelations from Mark Zuckerberg is that the U.S. government, like many other Western liberal governments around the world, are placing extreme pressure on social media platforms to censor the speech of its citizens. Now, in Europe, there are hate speech legislations. I'm based in London now, and I can speak to you some of the differences here. For example, using abusive language online causing gross offense, you can be criminally investigated for that. In the United States, because of our First Amendment, the U.S. government cannot. Therefore, it's trying to go about it in this roundabout way. And I think beyond the free speech discussion that we all need to have, we need to also be asking, why doesn't our American government, why doesn't the Biden administration trust the American citizens to be able to engage openly in speech with one another? Why do they need to have these apparatus to try to fight so-called misinformation? And who defines misinformation here is also very important, because as we've learned in what the experts have, many other things that the experts have said about COVID that they claimed were scientifically backed have turned out to be inaccurate, and those who expressed skepticism at the time were severely punished and silenced.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, I think this current government, the Democrat government, is trying to negotiate with themselves on how to censor stuff, because look, during the Revolutionary War, pre-Revolutionary War, the first thing the British did was, you can't gather because we don't want you to discuss plans to overthrow us, and you can't freely speak about certain things, especially not about the king, and that was why it's the first. But anyway, remember back in 2023, Michael Schellenberger, he testified after uncovering the Twitter files. Remember this?
One's commitment to free speech means nothing if it does not extend to your political enemies.
Political enemies. That's the key here, Andy.
That's true. You can see where the direction of pressuring for censorship has come from. It's come from removing and suppressing information that has been damaging to the Biden family, for example. And what's troubling to me is I'm not seeing more journalists coming out to push back against this, against the Biden administration or against the U.S. government, regardless of who's in the executive office. In fact, disturbingly, it's mostly journalists who are praising censorship efforts from liberal governments when they're in power, and or calling for more censorship. So we have things lopsided in America of the priorities of people who are meant to be protecting free speech and freedom of expression.
Right. Well, it's because most of those journalists, and some of them at the Washington Post, where democracy dies in the darkness, they aren't the ones who are being censored.
That's true. Exactly. They're not being censored, and in fact, they would like to see other journalists censored who reports things that go against the narrative.
Yeah, it's crazy. Andy Ngo, we appreciate you coming on, sir, very much.
Thank you.
All right.